So, welcome to the first lesson within the gender topic. The first topic that we're going to have a look at is termed culture, and this doesn't actually come from the gender topic, but it comes from the issues and debates topic. However, we're teaching it here because it's got strong links to quite a few of the things that we look at within gender. Issues and debates, we have come across some of these before, some of them we haven't yet, so we'll do those later on within some other modules. But first of all, before we go into culture specifically, I will do a bit of a recap on what we mean by issues, what we mean by debates, and I will also introduce all of the issues and debates that we look at. So issues, we mean problems. Okay, so an issue is a problem, and debates, what that means is some kind of discussion. So we'll run through the debates first of all. First debate that we have looked at briefly in lesson is free will and determinism. So free will is the idea that we have free choice over our behaviour, and we're free to choose what kind of behaviours we show and what behaviours we don't show. Determinism, you've got the picture with the puppet. So this is the idea that behaviour is predetermined either by internal factors, i.e. biological factors, or possibly external factors. So things like the situation that someone's in or how they've been brought up. Next debate, which is relevant to psychology, is the nature-nurture debate. So the idea that nature, our biological influences, what's going on in our bodies affects our behaviour, and again nurture, the idea that societal kind of factors, situational factors, environmental factors affect our behaviour. So you've got a picture here of the weighing up between nature and nurture, and also you've got the strand of DNA to represent inheritance and genetic factors, obviously the nature side of things, and then nurture, how you can see the child is being brought up, and those situational environmental factors. Next debate is the holistic and reductionist approaches, so holism versus reductionism. Reductionism, so you've got the picture of the duck, so the idea that our behaviour is reduced down to component pieces, just in the same way that you've got the duck there, and you can see separately the beak and all the inner goings on of that duck. It's reduced down to hormones, neurotransmitters, genes, environmental factors. Each component piece is separate, so it's reduced. Holism is more like looking at the sum of parts, which is greater than the whole. So you can see all the hands there working together. Holism is the idea that all those factors are important, but they work together, and in fact the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And finally, ideographic and nomothetic approaches, and this might be the kind of least, the one you're least aware of. I know we visit the other ones quite a lot within lessons. Ideographic means individual, nomothetic means groups. So does the theory look at individuals, and does it use things like case studies and very kind of individualistic research, or does it attempt to explain big groups of people and use a nomothetic approach? Issues that we're going to have a look at over the course. First of all is gender. Okay, so issues of gender, gender bias, is one or the other sex being more ignored, and is the research mainly based on one or other gender? Second one is culture. So obviously this is our topic for today, and this is our focus for today. And finally, ethical implications of research studies and theories. Ethics, obviously, we've spent quite a lot of time looking at in year 12. You should be aware of the relevant ethical issues, but also looking at socially sensitive research. So if you're using, say, for example, participants who have eating disorders, that might be a socially sensitive piece of research. So moving on to our culture topic. As you know, in psychology, we aim to cluster people into groups, and we aim to explain behaviour. A lot of the research is conducted in the USA and Europe. This is what we call Western biased. And then we tend to generalise results globally. So the research will be conducted, as I said, within kind of America or Europe, and then we generalise to people as a whole. And the assumption is that this behaviour, that whatever's seen in Europe or America, is the norm. So this assumption that any behaviour which is seen in the Western world, in Europe, in America, is then the norm, this is where our issue lies. So this is our problem. So cultural bias occurs when behaviour is interpreted and judged by standards integral to one's own culture. Now what we mean by that is, for example, if I was from European descent and I went over to Japan and judged them for eating sushi for their dinner rather than, the bog standard roast dinner or maybe beans on toast, that would be problematic. I'm judging their society's behaviour based on my own culture, based on my own values. Just in the same way that when we looked at attachment and we looked at the strange situation, the assumption was that secure attachment was the best type of attachment. Now, obviously, that's us again judging other cultures' behaviour and other cultures' actions on our own values and our own standards. So next two keywords, so we've got ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. So ethnocentrism is the assumption that one ethnic group is superior to another. It doesn't necessarily mean that others are seen in a negative light, however. It just means that one ethnic group is normal. And here you can see an image to kind of illustrate this. So the lady on the left in her bikini, so she's thinking everything is covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. The lady in the burqa over on the right-hand side, so she's saying nothing is covered but her eyes. What a cruel male-dominated culture. So they're both judging each other based on their own values. The lady on the right is assuming that she's superior. The lady on the left is assuming that she's superior. They're both assuming that their behaviour is normal. Cultural relativism. So this is the view that there is no global right or wrong. So social norms are culturally relative and context is vital. So here is the idea that we've got here the man on the left hand side saying try some deep fried crickets, they're delicious, and the man on the right hand side saying I'm not used to eating crickets, can you tell me why you like them? So he's not turned around and said that's wrong, I'm going to judge you on my cultural values, but instead it's relative, so he's taken in that context into account. The next couple of slides have got some extra key terms which I'm going to go through. The last two slides, so the previous two slides, have key terms on there that you need to know. So if you're not sure on those key terms, I would suggest go back to the previous slides, have another look over them, because those are the ones that the exam board specify. In terms of extra key terms, so we've got alpha bias and beta bias. Alpha bias occurs when a theory assumes that cultural differences are profoundly different and that the recognition of these enduring differences must always inform psychological research and understanding. So alpha bias takes into account the fact that people are different, that culturally we are different. Beta bias, on the other hand, occurs when real cultural differences are ignored or minimised and all people are assumed to be the same. So this results in universal research designs and conclusions that mistakenly assume that all cultures are the same. This is the idea that actually there are differences, but they aren't taken into account. So if research is conducted in one place and then generalised to another place, this could be an example of beta bias. Universality is the quality of a characteristic being shared by all people or things in the world or in a particular group. So an example of this might be, for example, all babies show smiling, they show crying behaviours, and facial expressions are universal worldwide. So I'm going to give you an example to hook this onto. So when we take into account mental health disorders, a lot of mental health disorders are seen worldwide, some of them aren't. So with the Inuit people of Greenland, they suffer from something called kayak angst. You probably haven't heard of kayak angst before, and I wouldn't be surprised if you agree with that. This is because it's not suffered by people within the UK, it's not suffered worldwide, it does just boil down to these Inuit people of Greenland. Now, symptoms that you might see if you went to visit Greenland and visited someone with kayak angst would be an acute anxiety about drowning or being lost at sea. This is because a lot of them are seal hunters who sail alone. I've given you a picture there on the right hand side so you can see how they sail and how they fish. This is linked to environmental threats. So it's here we're taking into account the idea that this isn't a worldwide phenomena, it's not a worldwide disorder, and it does seem to be constrained down to this small group of people in Greenland. So moving on to the gender topic, what I would like you to start having to think about is, what is the Western stereotype of gender? So I've put a few images together. The masculine ones you're now seeing on the left hand side, and the feminine ones you're now seeing on the right hand side. So take a minute or two to have a think about what kind of keywords would you associate with the pictures on the left, what describes those pictures, and the same for the pictures on the right. So last slide, test yourself. So before you come to lesson, I would like you to have a think about the following activities. So without looking at this video, without looking at your pre-reading, make sure you can do the following. Number 1, give examples of issues and debates within psychology. Number 2, explain why culture is an issue in psychology. And number 3, explain what is meant by cultural bias, ethnocentrism, and cultural relativity.